Hello ladies, this is Miss E here. So, lots of you guys are a little bit stressed at the moment about your music exam, so I thought I would just make a video just recapping everything that you need to know for your exams. So, I know that I said that I do have another video that contains a lot of the stuff that's going to be in the exam, but what I've decided to do is just do a brand new video from scratch, covering everything that you need to know. So if you follow along, make notes with me, and practice all of the things that I'm going to cover, you will be perfectly fine. I expect distinctions from all of you. Okay, so I know Mr. Smith has already spoken with you all, and I'm sure he would have covered all of the information. Also, just to remind you that this is all going to be multiple choice questions, so just as I'm going through everything, please just consider how this could be asked as a multiple choice. So I've got my setup here, I've got my phone above me, so if I pause every now and again, I'm just checking that I'm still in frame. So what I've done is I've just got my piece of paper and I've drawn my little staff over here that I'm going to be working with. So, like I say, always, the first thing to do is to draw our piano. In your exam, you need to write this out because it'll be the best tool that'll help you for your test. Okay, so how do we do that? We draw a nice big block, then we go and we fill out all of our notes into our piano, however many, it doesn't matter. Okay, then what we do is we color in our 2 donkey ears, skip a line, 3, skip a line, 2 donkey ears, skip a line, 3. And this can go on and on and on and on and on. Okay, so there's my piano. Now we need to assign note names to the keys of the piano. How do we do that? So wherever there are donkey ears, so I've got 2 donkey ears here and here, the note just to the left is called my C. So the same here, there's 2 donkey ears here, the note just to the left is C. Now remember, in music, we have the notes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, up to G. So those are the only notes we work with in music. We've got A all the way up to G. So my first note here is C, so I'm going to go C, D, E, F, G. Now remember, that's the last note, so we start again at A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Last note, so I start again at A. There we go. Now I've got my piano, and this is going to be a great tool for me in figuring out it's just going to be a good tool to help you answer all of your questions. Okay, I'm just looking for a pencil. I don't have one. Anyways, doesn't matter. Okay, so the first question in the paper or in any music paper is always to identify note names. Now, this is free marks. If you guys get this wrong, then you are really losing out on free marks. So, first thing to look at is the clef, because remember, the clefs have different note names. So the 2 clefs that we work with are the treble clef, which looks like this. Okay, and then we have the bass clef. I'm going to do the bass clef right over here. Okay, so I've got my treble clef and my bass clef. Now, the line for the treble clef is every good boy drinks Fanta. Okay, these are for the lines. Okay, the rhyme for the spaces is F-A-C-E, face. These are the rhymes for the spaces. Okay, so if I look at my actual staff, the first line I've just said is every, second line is good boy drinks Fanta. Okay, the next line or space then is going to be F-A-C-E. That's a C, not a G. Okay, so I've just memorized my rhymes and I know how to put them on the key or on the staff. So for example, if I have this note and I have to identify, so the question will have this and I'll say name the notes. I know that it's a treble clef because it's got a treble clef, and so the first space in the treble clef is F for face. A quick tip that you can just remember on the day is that the first line of the treble clef is E. If you remember that the first line is E, you can figure out whichever note is up or below because it's the alphabet. So this first line is E, just like on the piano. So the next one up is in the space is going to be F. The next one up is going to be G. The next one up is going to be A in the space. The next is B, and then we start back at G, and it goes on and on and on like that. Same thing if we go below. If this bottom line is E, what's one letter name before E? D. Therefore, this note over here underneath the E is going to be D. What would one note below this be? If this is D, one below D is C. And so it goes. So all you have to remember is that the bottom line is E. Then you go up the alphabet and down the alphabet. Look here, E, F, G, A, B, C. That's a C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And we'll go all the way up. And the same thing here. This is E, D, C, B, A. And it goes backwards on the keyboard as well. Okay, so that's the treble clef. Easy, free marks. Let's look at the bass clef now. So remember, treble is higher, bass is lower. So all we do, I know Mr. Smith has a different rhyme altogether, but I like to just remember one rhyme. So treble clef is higher, bass is lower. So what I like to do is take this rhyme, every good boy drinks Fanta, and move it one down. So just like in the treble clef, the first line is E, my bass clef, this line over here is going to be E. So this is every good boy drinks Fanta. And if this space, the first space is F, I'm moving everything down. Therefore, this space is going to be my F. F, A, C, E. So can you see how I've taken this and I've literally moved it one space down in my bass clef? Much easier to remember than to have 4 different rhymes. Okay. Again, just like in the treble clef, the first line is E. In the bass clef, the first line is G. So, if this line is G, one space up, if I look at my piano, is going to be A. And one up is B. One up is C. One up is D, E, F, G, A, B, and so it goes on. So I can continue this. So if this is F, in the alphabet, what's the next letter? F, G. And then we start back at A, B, C, D. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. Okay, so what are my golden rules for note names? For the treble clef, I don't know if you guys can see that. Let me just switch over to a different color. Okay. For the treble clef, which looks like this, the first line is E. Okay. For my bass clef, the first line is G. And if you can remember those 2 things, you can figure out all of the note names for both of the clefs. Okay, so that's the first topic done. Right, let's move on to our second topic, which is identifying key signatures. Okay, so next topic is key signatures. Now, the way that I like to teach key signatures is with a rhyme. Okay. So I'm going to teach this from scratch. So this is something that you need to have written down and memorized. So we obviously have 2 different types of, so we're talking about major signatures. Major key signatures. Okay. The point of key signatures is they give us a list of notes that we are allowed to use within a specific key. So just like a key unlocks a door to a new room, key signatures unlock a door for musicians to new sounds within that specific key signature. That's the point of this. So we have sharps. Okay, so remember these black notes, when you're going up the piano, we are making the sound sharper. And when we play further down the piano, we are making the sound flat. Okay, so we have sharp key signatures and flat key signatures. Now, let's talk about my rhyme. So my rhyme that I'm about to teach you tells me the name of the key signature. Okay, it tells me how many sharps or flats that key signature has, and it also tells me the order of sharps or flats. Okay, so this is my sharp rhyme. I'm not going to write out the letters, so I'm going to do it really slowly and you can write it out in your own notes. The way that I'm writing this out is the exact same way that you need to be writing this out in your notes, because that's how you're going to learn it correctly. Okay, so I have Father Charles goes down and ends battle. Okay, now my flat rhyme is exactly the same except it's reversed. So it is battle ends and down goes Charles's father. Those are my rhymes. So I've got my sharp rhyme and my flat rhyme. Okay, now the first thing I do once I have my sharps and my flat rhymes is I identify C. Remember, C is neutral. C is home ground. I would make a note of that. C is neutral. C is my home ground. Okay, in everything in music, we refer back to C. Middle C, C in my key signatures, C is neutral. So the first thing that we do is we find C in both of our rhymes and we make them neutral. In other words, we give them a 0. So here's my C in the sharp and I'm going to give it a 0 just at the bottom. You'll see why now in just a second. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing for the flat key signatures. I find my C and I make it neutral by giving it a 0. Now, once we have 0, we're going to fill in the rest of the numbers. So remember, in South Africa, we read from left to right. So naturally, I'm going to start and I'm going to move from left to right. So if this is 0, logically, I'm going to number this 1. And so that'll become 2, and that'll become 3, and that's 4, and that's 5. Now I'm at my end of my row, but I still have up here, I don't have a number assigned. So I'm going to loop back around. So I've gone 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Loop back around to the top. I'm going to put a 6 and a sharp. And I'm going to put a 7 and a sharp. Okay, you'll understand why in just a second. If you're confused, don't worry. It's going to become clear as I go on. Okay, so to recap, I've got my sharp rhyme. Father Charles goes down and ends battle. Step 2, I identify C and I make it neutral. Then I number all the way up to 5, come back around, 6 with the sharp, 7 with the sharp. Okay, now I'm going to do the exact same thing for the flat key signature rhyme. So here's 0, so of course I'm going to name this 1. And the same thing, I'm going to come back around to the top, 2, and I'm going to add a flat, because we're in the flat rhyme. 3 flat, 4 flat, 5 flat, 6 flat, and 7 flat. So you can see how we have a C with the 0, and we have a C sharp with the 7. We have C with the 0, and we have C flat with the 7. Okay, so remember I said to you that these rhymes not only tell us the name of the key, they also tell us how many sharps or flats they have, and along with that they also tell us the order of sharps or flats. Okay, so to write that down, the sharps that I have, this is now the order of sharps or flats. So I've got F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp, E sharp, and B sharp. So can you see that these letter names are also the order of the sharps? And the same thing here for the flats. I've got a B flat, an E flat, an A flat, a D flat, a G flat, a C flat, and an F flat. Order of sharps. Okay, so they go like this. They start over here and they end over here. This is my order of sharps or flats. Okay, how is this helpful in our music? So, first things first, we have to assign a key. So I'm going to be working in the treble clef. Okay? The question says, write out G major. So the first thing I have to do is, my question is looking for G major. I have to find G within my sharp or my flat rhyme. So I have a look over here. Here's a G. So I'm going to remember that one. But now what about the flats? I'm going to look here. Here's a G. But this has got G flat. So this is G major. This is G flat major. So I have to write out G major. So I know that it's going to be this one. So G major has the number 1 by it. But remember I said that this shows me my order of sharps or flats. So this has got a number 1. So what's the first sharp in my order? It's F sharp. And so G major has 1 sharp and that sharp is F sharp. How do I write that? So G has 1 F sharp. So I'm going to go, now this is a rule. For the sharps, we start at the top and then we zigzag down. That's my rule for the sharps. So I'm not going to start with this F over here, because remember this is face, F-A-C-E. I don't want to put it there because my rule says I start at the top. So let me find a higher F. So let me look at my lines. This is E. Every good boy drinks Fanta. Okay, so here is my sharp. So I have placed my sharp on the top line, which is F. Therefore, I've got an F sharp. So this becomes G major. Okay, let's do another example. I want you to write out A major. So I'm going to look, here's an A, but this has got a flat sign on it. So it can't be that. I'm just looking for A major. But if I have a look over here, here's an A, just an A. So this is A major. So A major tells me that there are 3 sharps, because first of all it's in the sharp line and there's a number 3. 3 sharps, but now which sharps? Then I look at my order of sharps. First 3 in the line. So it's going to be an F sharp, a C sharp, and a G sharp. So I know that I have to start at the top. So here's my F sharp, okay? And then my rule says I have to zigzag. So I'm going to go down to my C, F, A, C. Here's my C. So I've now got the F and I've got the C sharp. I'm still missing one. I need a G. But remember the rule says zigzag. So I need to now go up. So if I go, I know that this is an F, right? So if I look at my piano, 1 note above F is G. So if this line is F, the next area above it is going to be G. So I'm going to put my G in this space. There we go. Now I have my G major key signature. Let's do a different example. Let's do C major. If I look over here, I've got a C with a 0. But I also have a C sharp with 7. If I look here, I have a C with a 0, but I also have a C flat with 7. So remember, I'm looking for C major. And C is just C. It's not C flat and it's not C sharp. Therefore, C has got the number 0, meaning there is no sharps or flats. So there is my key signature, done. I'm looking for, let's do F major. Here's an F, but that's got a sharp. That's F sharp, so it can't be that. let's look over here. Here's an F, and it's got the number 1. But remember, this F is in the flat line. So, if this is F major and it's got 1 flat, the order of flats tells me that the first flat is B flat. And so, F major has got 1 B flat. So, let's find our B. Every good boy. So, you can see that in the sharps I zigzagged down. But in the flats, I'm going to zigzag up. So here's my B, so my next movement needs to be up, which you'll see in the next example. But remember, F major only has 1. So there's my key signature for F major. Let's do another example. Let's do D flat major. Now I see the word D flat, so obviously I'm going to find it in my flat line. So let's look here. Here's D flat major, and D flat has the number 5. Therefore, it's got 5 flats. And remember, the order of flats is this. So I'm going to do B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, and G flat. So the first one is my B. Here's my B. Then remember, the rule says I have to zigzag up now. So my next is E. F, A, C, E. I'm not going to do my E down here because that's zigzagging down. I have to zigzag up. F, A, C, E. Okay, now I need to do A. So I'm going to zigzag down. F, A. Now I need to do D. Every good boy drinks. I've got one more left. It's G. Every good. Can you see how this makes a perfect zigzag up and then down and then up and then down? Just like this makes a zigzag down and then up, and it would carry on that way. Okay, I hope this makes sense. If you need to watch it over a few times, you can. The way that this will be assessed in multiple choice is you will have to name the key signature. So for example, I would give you this and I would say identify the key signature. So you would see, okay, there's 0 sharps or flats. What has the number 0? C does, so it's C major. Or you would see this and it would be 1 flat. So I'd look for flats. That's got the number 1. Therefore the answer is F major. Let's do one example like that. So I'm going to scratch this out. And I'm going to write in a key signature. Okay, so I'm working with this example over here. And I say to you, identify the key signature. The first thing you do is write out your rhymes. Then you say 1, 2, 3. There are 3 flats. So I'm going to go to my flat rhyme and I'm going to find the letter that has the number 3. B flat has a number 2. E flat has a number 3. Therefore, this is 3 flats. E flat has 3 flats. So therefore, this is E flat major. Right, I hope that makes sense and that was helpful to you. The only way that I do this is by memorizing this rhyme, writing it out in my paper, because once I've got it written down, I have all the answers that I need right here. If you can read and interpret this rhyme, you can answer any question on key signatures. Okay, my next section that I'm going to be covering is intervals. So, intervals are super easy. There's no need to get any of these wrong. Intervals are probably one of the easiest questions that we can ask you. So, the first thing to remember about an interval, this is a rule, okay? The bottom note, or my first note, counts as 1. So what does that mean? You will be given a staff like this, for example, and there will be a whole bunch of notes on there, okay, like this. Okay, so those are 3 examples, and you have to identify the interval between them. So the first thing that you have to be able to do is identify the note names. If you can't tell what notes they are, then you're going to get the answer wrong. So let's make this number 1, number 2, and number 3. Okay, so the question says, name the intervals between interval number 1, number 2, and number 3. So the thing that I like to do is rewrite this, but in letter form. So remember, I'm in the treble clef, and my first line's letter is E, based on my rhyme, every good boy drinks Fanta. But remember, it's just like the alphabet. So if this line over here is E, and I think about the alphabet, what's the letter that comes just before the E? So it would be E, this is D, this is C. Okay, let's double check. If I have to go forward in the alphabet, it would be C, D, E. Okay, so my bottom note for number 1 is C. Okay, this is the note in the first space, and I know that the first space is F, F-A-C-E, or I know that this is E, so 1 up is F. So I then have F over C. Now, my rule says that the bottom note, or the first note, counts as 1. So what I do is, I identify that the bottom note is number 1, and I go up my alphabet until I hit the top note. So let's go C, D, E, F. Can you see how it's 4 steps in between C and F? The reason I say that you have to count this as number 1 is if you don't, you'll get the answer wrong. So this is an interval of a fourth. If I were to go C, D, E, F, I would write down a third, but that's wrong. C has to be number 1. So do this on your hands. You identify the note names, C and F, and I go C, D, E, F. It's an interval of a fourth. Let's look at question number 2. Okay, so I have to identify my letter names. This line is E. What is the note before E in the alphabet? D. So my bottom note is D. What is my note on top? Well, if this is E, we've got every good boy. So I know that I have B over D. Remember, D counts as 1. So I'm going to go D, E, F, G, A, B. This is 6. Let's check it again. D, E, F, G, A, B. Therefore, I have an interval of a sixth. Okay, let's look at the last one. Okay, this is on the first line of the treble clef, and I know that the first line is E. This is at the last space, so let's go F, A, C, E. So I know that I have E over E, okay? But now, E and E are the same note. So already, I can tell that it's going to be unison. Another option is to tell that this is an octave, because from one note up to the next note, the same note is an octave. Okay, let's check it. E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E. It's an eighth. And octo in Greek means eighth. Okay, so that's intervals done. You will be given intervals and you have to identify the interval. Okay. The next section that I'm going to talk about is the tonic solfa. So, tonic solfa. The tonic solfa is basically a form or a vehicle that musicians use to assign sounds to scales. So, the tonic solfa, I'm just going to write it up here, is do, re, mi, fa, so, la, ti, do. Okay, do, a deer, a female deer, that's where it comes from. So it's do, re, mi, fa, so, la, ti, do. 8. Remember, a scale consists of 8 notes. Well, technically 7, and then the tonic, or the first one, is repeated. So we've got 2 do's, which are the same notes, just one's low and one's high. So, how does this apply to exam work or how it'll be tested? So, first thing is you will be given it in a key, either treble clef or bass clef. Okay, I'm going to use treble clef. Then, remember, in every single piece of music we have a key signature. So it's either going to be a sharp key signature or a flat C key signature. So this is where you have to remember your Father Charles goes down. So for example, I'm going to assign the key signature. Okay, so I've got two flats. Every good boy is a B, and every good F, A, C, E. So I've got a B flat and E flat. Now if you go back to your notes that you've just made about key signatures, you'll be able to identify the key signature. So I'm going to give you a few seconds, have a look in your notes and find the key signature that has two flats. Okay, so I hope you were all screaming at the camera that the key signature is B flat major. Okay, so I'm in B flat major, and now I'm going to write some random music on here. Okay, I'm just gonna make it up just for exam purposes. Okay, so let's do like this. Okay, there's my music. So, I have to decide or assign the tonic solfa to this piece of music. So the first thing that you have to do is look at the music and identify the key signature, which we have already done. So number one is identify the key signature. Excuse my gross writing, I don't even know what that is. Okay, number one, identify the key signature. Okay, now that we know what the key signature is, what I like to do is write out the scale. Okay, then what I like to do is assign the solfa to that scale. Okay, so let's do these things. I've got my music. Number one is identify the key signature, which we've already done, B flat major. And remember, we do that with our flat and our sharp rhyme, which is Father Charles goes down and ends battle, as well as battle ends and down goes Charles's father. Now we have to write out the scale. So the scale for B flat major is going to start on B flat major, on B flat, because that's the scale, what it's called. The name of the scale of the key signature is also the beginning notes of the scale. So I've got my B, and now I'm going to go up in my letters until I get back to B. So we've got B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. But remember, I'm working with B flat, so that's going to be a B flat. Now I have to think about my key signature. So remember, over here I have a B flat and I have an E flat, F, A, C, E. So I've already got flats on my B's, but I need to put a flat on my E. Okay, so this is the scale for B flat major. That's step number 2 done. Now I have to assign the solfa notation to the scale. So remember, the solfa notation is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. You have to memorize that. If you don't have it in your brain, then you're going to have a problem. Okay, so do is number 1. So this is going to be do. And then it's going to be re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Okay, so that's my 3rd step done. Now, my question says identify the tonic solfa within the music. So we go over here. What is this note? We have to identify what the note is. So we go every good boy. So this is a B flat. So if I look at the work that I've already done, I know that B flat is do, so I can put a do over here. What is this note? Every good, G. Let's go to our scale. Here's G. G is La. What is this note? F, A, C. Let's find C. C is Re. What is this note? F, A, C, E. Let's find E. E flat, Fa. Sorry guys, my video cut off. So here's the E flat. We found it over here, so I know that it's Fa. And then if I go here, every good boy, that's a B. So B is back to Do. So you've just managed to identify all of the music in solfa notation. Okay, I'm going to stop now and just write out a second example that we can look at. And then that's you good for solfa notation. Okay, here's my second example. Please excuse this gross mess. I made a mistake there, so I've just scratched it out. Okay, so second example, you have to name each note with the tonic solfa. So according to my steps, the first thing I have to do is identify the key signature. So I look over here, I've got 1, 2, 3 sharps. So I go back to my Father Charles Goes Down, my sharp round, and I look for the letter that has the number 3 by it. So I'm going to pause and let you go and find the answer. Okay, so you should have been able to see this has got 3 sharps, and the letter that has 3 sharps is in fact A major. Right. So, second step says write out the scale. So I'm going to do that. I have, let's do it in black, I've got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. But now remember, A major has got 3 sharps, and the sharps are F sharp, so I put a sharp by the F, C sharp, so I put a sharp by the C, and G sharp, so I put a sharp by the G. So that is my A major scale. Okay, now the third step is to assign the solfa notation to the scale. So the first is always going to be Do, Re, Mi, Fa, So, La, Ti, Do. Okay, now we have to find what these notes are and write out the correct solfa notation. So let's have a look over here. This note is the first in the space, which is F. Okay, so F is going to be La. Every good boy. Okay, so that's going to be Re. E, every, so. F-A is going to be Do. This is F, which is La, and this is also every good boy drinks Fanta, La. Alright, there's 2 examples of solfa notation. This is kind of how it'll be asked. You need to be able to identify what the notes are, and the only way you can do that is by identifying the key signature. I hope that makes sense. Alright guys, the next section that I want to talk to you about is dynamics, expression, and tempo. Now, these are all on page 49, if I'm not mistaken, in your workbook, which should be on Teams, okay? It's a 1-pager and it's got a whole bunch of tables. And basically, it's a terminology with a symbol with the definition. And you have to study that page until you know it like you know your own name. Okay, so that is simple terminology that can be tested. So it'll ask you to identify what a certain term means or what a certain term does. So for example, dynamics tell us whether we play loud or soft. Okay, tempo tells us the speed that we play. Expressions are terms that we use to explain how we should play. So for example, if I read a piece of piano music and it says con grazia, it means that I need to play the music gracefully. Or if the piece of music says mezzo forte, I know that I need to play the piece of music moderately loud. Or if it says piano, I play it soft. Or pianissimo, I play it very soft. So I can't help you with these things. These are just things that you need to learn and study yourself. Okay, again guys, that's free marks. Don't miss out on that, and it is in your workbook. Okay, so the next section that we're going to be speaking about is note values and time signatures. So note values and time signatures. My pen is running out. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is note values. Now this all is in your workbook, okay? And this is also a concept that you can super easily study. So, the biggest note that we have in music is a whole note or a semi-breve, okay? That's what it looks like. It's just a plain circle. So, whole note or semi-breve, okay? Mr. Smith likes you to use whole notes, so your prerogative, it doesn't matter, just so long as you know that it's either a whole note or a semi-breve, okay? And a whole note is 1, okay? Because it's whole. Technically, a whole note is 4 beats. This is where I need you guys to think a little bit mathematically. Okay, if I divide 1 in half, I get 2 halves, right? Because 2 halves make 1 whole. So if I divide my whole note into half, logically, I'm going to get 2 half notes, right? So if this is 1, and I've divided it in half, these are going to be halves, okay? And if a whole note contains 4 beats, then 1 half note contains 2 beats. Okay, so that's a whole note, this is a half note. Again, if I split a half note, what am I going to have? 2 quarter notes, because a half divided into 2 is going to give me 2 quarter notes. Okay, remember that I'm doing this on one side each time, but this is happening on both sides. So just like that splits, so does that. And just like that's going to split, so does that, and that one, and that one. I'm just showing you on one side. Okay, so if a half beat contains 2 beats, logically, a quarter beat is then going to contain 1 beat. Okay? If I divide this again, so I'm now dividing a quarter note into 2 notes, I'm then going to have 2 eighth notes, because half of a quarter is 1/8. Okay? And if this quarter note is divided into an eighth note, the quarter note has 1 beat, and I divide the 1 in half, the eighth note is then going to have a half a beat. Okay, so this works just like maths. This can go on and on and on and on. So if I divide an eighth note, I'm going to get a 16th note. And if I divide a 16th note, I'm going to get a 32nd. Okay? And if I divide a 32nd, I'm going to get a 64th, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, but up to this point is kind of where you need to learn up to, because the rest you can figure it out. But musically, we don't really use notes much smaller than possibly a 16th or a 32nd. Okay, but if you understand this concept, you can continue to divide it smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay, so those are note values. Why is this important to us? The reason is these are what we use to make music, and these are what tell musicians how long to play each note for. So along with note names, we have time signatures. So time signatures, this is maybe something to write down. Time signatures tell us how many beats are in a bar, okay, and which note takes a beat. So, for example, time signatures look like this. We have 4/4, okay? We have 3/4, we have 8/6, we have all different sorts of makeups of time signatures, okay? Remember, time signatures are based on these notes. And can you see how every single number over here is an even number? Okay, so the bottom number is always going to be even, and I'll explain that to you now. So, in time signatures, okay, let's use this as an example. The bottom note tells us, the bottom number tells us which note takes a beat, okay, and the top number tells us how many beats are in a bar. So the bottom number tells us which note takes a beat, and the top number tells us how many beats are in a bar. So if we use this as an example, the bottom number is telling us which note takes a beat. So it says which of these notes takes a beat. Okay. If you look at that number, it's 2. When we go back to our breakdown of our notes, which note over here has a 2 in it? A whole note? Half note. Can you see how the half note's bottom number is a 2? And this is a 2. Therefore, in this key signature, if I've got 2, 2, the bottom number is telling me that the beat, the note that takes a beat, is a half note. The top number says 2. Therefore, in this bar, there is going to be 2 half notes. So it's going to have 2 of these. 2 half notes. However these notes are broken up doesn't matter, as long as they equate to 2 of these. So for example, I could have this. Okay. And I could say, complete the bar. I know that this bar has got 2 half beats. Okay, here's a quarter and a quarter, which add together to make 1 half beat. And here's 1 quarter, which makes up half of a heartbeat. So technically, I need another quarter to make up the bar, because that plus that gives me another one of those. Let's look at another example. Let's look at 3, 4. Okay, so remember, the bottom number tells us which note takes a beat. So let's figure out which note that is. So if I look over here, the only note that has a 4 in it is a quarter note. So I know that I'm working with quarter notes. The top number tells me how many quarter notes. So technically in this bar, I'm going to need 3 quarter notes. So let's say in this bar, I have this note and this note. Okay, so those are 2 8s. So I know that 2 8s added together gives me 1 quarter note. So technically I have this quarter note, but I'm still needing another 2 quarter notes. So how do I write another 2 in this bar in 1 note? Well, I know that 2 quarter notes added together gives me 1 half note. So I simply have to add 1 more half note, and that gives me that one and that one. There's my bar completed. Let's look at one last example. Let's look at 4, 4. Okay, so 4, 4. The bottom number tells me which note takes a beat. I know that the 4 is the quarter note. The top number tells me how many of those notes are in a bar. So technically, this bar needs to have 1, 2, 3, 4 quarter notes. Okay, let's say that I already have this note in my bar. That's a half note, but remember, 2 quarter notes added together make a half note. So technically, I've already got that and that, so I need another 2. So what I'm going to do is add in another half note, because that then gives me the next 2 quarter notes. I hope that makes sense. Please do refer back to your workbook, because this is all in there and it is explained in depth. Okay, let's quickly just touch on dotted notes. So remember, a dotted note, so let's work over here, just in between here. This is where I'm working right now. Okay, so here is my note. Okay, I've got a quarter note. Now, remember I said earlier that all of these notes are even. We don't have any odd numbers. But what happens if I don't want the musician to play for 1 beat? I want them to play for 1.5 beats. There's no halves here. So what I do is I use a dot. The dot indicates half of the note it follows. So this is 1 beat and I want the musician to play 1.5, so I put a dot after that. So technically the musician is then playing a quarter note and an 1/8 note, because an 1/8 is half of a quarter. Okay, let's say I wanted the musician to play for 1.5 plus another quarter. I would have 2. So remember, the dot is half of the notes it follows. So this is half of this, which is an 1/8 note, and this is then half of this, which would then be a 16th note. Again, this is in the workbook, so if you just want to brush up on the concept of dotted notes, you can refer back to that. Okay, so the last section that you need to know for your exam is chord numbers and inversions. Okay, this is quite a complex concept if you've never ever worked with this before. So once again, the only way that you're going to be able to do this correctly is if you understand key signatures. So this is a concept that you need to drill over and over and over again until you know that you understand it and that you can identify every single key signature. So first step is to identify the key signature. Okay, and I'm going to give you a second to identify the key signature. Okay, so you should have noticed that this is a sharp, so you go to your sharp rhyme, which is Father Charles goes down and ends battle, and you look for the letter name that has number 1 by it, and you would have found that G major has an F sharp. Okay, so let's just put G major over here. Okay, now the thing with chords and inversions is that you have to understand that a chord, first of all, also known as a triad, is made up of 3 notes. And those 3 notes are stacked on top of one another. So as you can see, I have a whole bunch of chords over here. They all consist of 3 notes and they are all stacked right on top of each other. So these are all chords. If they are spread out, 1, 1, 1, then they're not chords, they're individual notes. But when they're stacked on top of each other, they're played at the same time, making them chords. Okay. Now, with chords, let's just make some notes quickly. So a chord or a triad, 3 notes stacked on top of one another. Okay? They are played at the same time. Right. Now, the next thing to note is that chords can be played in inversions. Okay, so we have root position, we have first inversion, and we have second inversion. Okay, so the symbol for this root is nothing, so I'm going to put a line. The symbol for first inversion is a 6. And the symbol for the second inversion is 6/4. Okay, so we are working in G major. Okay, so let's write out a G chord. Now, remember, they stacked on top of one another, and we read chords bottom up. So the bottom note is going to be the note that we focus on. That's where we get our names from. We read the chords bottom up. So let's look at the G major scale, okay? I'm going to write my G major scale over here. So remember, we go G, A, B, C, D, E, F, back to G. But remember, we've got an F sharp, so I have to include that in my scale. Here's my F, so I put my sharp over there. Okay, this is separate from this. This is just the scale. Let me put a box around it so that we don't get confused. Okay, so this is just my G major scale. Okay, so remember, chords are stacked notes made up into 3. So how do we make a chord? A chord, we take one note, skip a note. Second note, skip a note, third note. So in other words, if we look at G major root position, we've got G, skip a note, G, A, B, skip a note, D. So there's my G chord, G, A, B, C, D. Can you see how I've skipped the notes in between? Okay. That is G in root position because it's starting on its roots. It's starting on the first note of that chord. If I had to write G in first inversion, okay, I'm technically taking G, B, D, okay, and I'm moving the G to the top. So now I have G first inversion, which looks like this. B, D with the G at the top. Okay, so this is G in root. This is G first inversion. Okay, now we do this again for second inversion. We take first inversion and we take the B and we move it to the top. So now I have D, G, D, G with the B at the top. So now I have G in second inversion. So can you see how we've got the G, no symbol because it's in root. Then we took the base and we moved it to the top, which gave us G first inversion. Then we took first inversion and took the bass notes and moved it to the top, which then gave us G second inversion. That's how the inversions work, and you do this for every single chord. It doesn't matter. All you're doing is taking the root note, moving it to the top. We've got first inversion. Then to get second inversion, you do it again. You take the root and move it to the top. So technically, they're the exact same. This chord and this chord and this chord are the exact same. They just played in a different order. How does this then apply to this? Okay, so we understand root, first inversion, and second inversion. Okay, like I said, this can be applied to every single chord. Now, the reason that this is important is because just like every single key signature has a scale, we can assign that scale Roman numerals. Okay, so this is something that you need to study. Okay, this is something that you need to learn off by heart. Okay, so Roman numerals are a different way of numbering. It's a different type of numbering system. And this is something that we use a lot in music. Okay, so I'm going to go 1 to 8 in Roman numerals. And the way I write them is the way that you need to study them. Okay, so we've got number 1, major. Number 2, minor, because it's lowercase. Number 3 is minor, because it's lowercase. Number 4, major. Number 5, major. Okay. Number 6 is minor. Number 7 is a diminished one. And number 8 or number 1. Okay, so technically I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, or 1. You can take this and apply it to every single scale. Okay, it's just another way of naming chords in a scale. So let's take this and apply it to our example of G major. So I'm going to take my G major scale and I'm going to stick it under here. Okay, so I've got G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G. Okay, so I know that G is Do or 1, and I know that the Roman numeral for G is the capital I. Okay, I know that A is number 2 or Re, and I know that the Roman numeral for A is a lowercase number 2. Okay, why is this important? You could be given a piece of music just like this, and you have to identify the chord and its inversion. Okay, when you have to identify the chord, you have to do it with a Roman numeral. So let's look at number 1. Okay. First thing you have to do is identify your key signature. We've already done that, so we know that we're working in G major. That's number 1, okay? Number 2 is to identify my notes, okay? So, in this example over here, I'm working with every good. G, B, D. Okay. I wonder if I shouldn't, no, I'm just going to keep it here. Okay, so question number 1 is over here. So my notes are G, B, D. Okay, so remember, I need to check that this is a correct chord. So I'm going G, skip 1 B, skip 1 D. So that makes sense that that's a chord. Okay, they make sense because they flow. So it's going 1, skip a note, 2, skip a note, 3. So I know that this is a G chord, right? Because that flows. It's 1, skip 1, 2, skip 1, 3. G chord. Okay, so what is G in G major? It's number 1. Can you see how this chord is number 1 in root position? So therefore my answer over here is going to be I. Let's identify the next chord. The next chord, I've got E, every good, F, A, C. Okay, let's figure out what this chord is. I go E, F, G, A, B. I've got a problem. This doesn't follow the normal pattern of note, skip a note, note, skip a note, note. E, F, G, A, B. Doesn't make sense. So I already know that this is going to be some sort of inversion. So what I have to do is rearrange the notes until they follow this order of note, skip a note, note, skip a note, note. So instead of starting on the E, let me start on the G. G, A, skip it, B. Doesn't make sense because the next note is C. Let's start with C. If we go C, D, E, F, G. So technically, if I take this note and put it down here, I'm going to have C, D, E, F, G. I've got a C chord, but it's in first inversion because my root has been moved to the top. So technically this is C, first inversion. But now, remember, I want to give it a Roman numeral. So if I look at my scale, I can see that C is number 4. So technically, the answer to number 2 is 4, 6. First inversion. So my answer over here is going to be 4, 6. Let's look at the next one. If you notice what these look like, can you see how these are perfectly stacked and these aren't? There's a gap between. That should be a telltale sign to you that these are not going to be in root position because there's a gap. So already I know I'm looking for either first inversion or second inversion. This is stacked beautifully, so I know it's going to be root, but this isn't, so I'm going to look for an inversion. Okay, let's do the next one. If you like, you can try and pause the video here and complete these and then check in with me to see if you understand the concept correctly. Okay, let's write out my notes. So this is an E. Okay, then I've got F, A, B, C. Okay, so already I know that this is going to be some sort of inversion because there's a gap there. So E, F, G doesn't make sense. So let's start from A, B, C, D, E. So technically my E should be there. So I know that this is then going to be the root of my chord because it makes sense. A, B, C, D, E. But I now have my E at the bottom. So technically, if my chord was written out correctly, if it was A, B, C, D, E, and I moved the A to the top, I would have C in the bass, but I don't, I have E. So that means I've moved the A 1 and I've moved the C 2, making this A second inversion. Let me explain it again. I have E, A, C, but I know that A is the root of my chord. So technically, this is how my chord should look. It should be A, C, E. So I've moved the A up once, okay, giving me C, E, A, but that's not what I have. So if I move the C up, then I have E, A, C, making it that, which makes this second inversion because I've moved 2 of my notes up. So now I take A and I find it in my Roman numerals. I can see that A is number 2. Therefore, the answer over here is going to be 2, 6, 4. Let's look at the next one. Number 4, sorry. I already know that this is going to be in root because of how nicely it's stacked. Okay, so what's the first note? If this is E, one back is going to be D. Okay, F, A. So let's look. D, E, F, G, A. Perfect, it's in root position. So D is number 5. So my answer is going to be 5 in root, which has no funny symbols. All right, let's look at the last one. The last one, which is number 5. Every good boy. B. Every good boy drinks. D. Okay, if this is D, I've got E, F, G. Okay. So let's have a look. B, C, D, E, F. Doesn't make sense. Let's start on the D. D, E, F. Doesn't make sense. Let's start on the G. G, A, B, C, D. So technically my chord should be written G, A, B, C, D. Can you see how it's starting on the next note up? So technically this is moved up once, making this G first inversion. G is my number 1 in first inversion. Okay, that is how you can identify chords as well as inversions. You need to understand the inversion before you can then apply it to the Roman numerals. Okay, everybody, I hope that this was really helpful for you. I'm going to take pictures of all of these notes. They are a bit messy, but I hope that they'll be helpful for you. If you still have any further questions, please message me on Teams. I'll try to help as much as I can where I can. And if you're still stuck, there are lots of resources on YouTube, or you're more than welcome to give me a phone call, or we can Zoom or do whatever we need to do to help you get prepared for your exam. Okay, I wish you guys all the best. I'm sending you all my love. And just know that I'm thinking about you. Okay, bye from me. Love you all. Good luck.